Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Perry, also known as Books Aren't Boring, and today we're taking a slightly different approach to the topics of Books Aren't Boring. Now, you know that usually my format in my videos is that I will take a book, like a full book, and do a synopsis on it and what I found enjoyable in it, in hopes that you will also read it and find it enjoyable. However, this time I have decided that I am going to do a bit of a switch up, but it's still going to be related to school, so sorry, and it's going to be about short stories this time. I noticed that most of the short stories that I compiled while doing my plans for this video were mostly by Ray Bradbury, and another one that I didn't read for school, but I just wanted to mention it because I know a lot of people like it or are interested in it. So yeah, I have three by Ray Bradbury. So we're going to start out with those because these are the ones that I read in middle school and I still remember them to this day. So obviously, author. I find that short stories are better at portraying ideas than long stories, or about the same. Like, you don't need 500 pages of words to get across one message. You can use a shorter story, and not only is it easier to digest, there's often more packed into them, honestly, because there's less space to get your message across. If your efforts are squished into 5 or 6 pages, or even about 20 in the case of one of these, you don't have as much time to build up your message and the theme of what you're trying to do. So instead, you just have to go in and get it across, essentially. So we're gonna go in order of what I have written here, and yeah. I might not mention every single short story that I've ever read and you've ever read, but we're just going to get into the video and hope that some of you will relate to some of these or all of these, because schools really love to teach about Ray Bradbury. So let's begin. First up, we have The Veldt, the ultimate technology bad story. A bit of the we live in a society for you today. The whole idea of it really is a technology bad story, but because Ray Bradbury didn't grow up in the society we're in today, the technology bad narratives aren't exactly the same, and they're more of the dangers of letting robots take over our lives, because of course, as more things got automated in the past, people were like, wait, we won't have our own jobs anymore. And obviously, yes, it's the whole robots are taking over our jobs and systems and all that, but there's still things that are better off done by real people, and this is kind of one of those stories that tries to exemplify that through, oops, the house overtook with the children, now the parents are dead. That is basically it. Short synopsis of it, because the story is short, so it's really easy to summarize. This family lives in this very automated house, not just hey Google, but I don't have one in my room, don't worry. Not just hey Google, but more of everything does everything for them. It's sci-fi, so they can make food for them, all that kind of stuff. And there's one room called the nursery where the kids can play, and basically anything they think of will show up on the screens around them, and it gets really realistic, and it's supposed to entertain them while the parents do whatever they're doing, because they don't have to take care of their kids. And then one day the parents go in there, and it's this African Veldt, name of the story, and they're kind of weirded out by it because it seems way too realistic. The lions get really close and they're like, oops, gotta run. So they're gonna shut down the house. Problem is the kids have gotten too used to the house, and that's the whole technology overtaking real people thing, and they're like, we don't want you, we want the house. And it's kind of weird and not horror adjacent at all, though the parents are mauled to death at the end. But it's not a horror story. It's not even a warning story. It's more a future predicting thing. It's not one of those stories where the message at the end is guys, we can't have technology be everything, or it's terrible. It's more of just this is what could happen, let's see. And obviously this hasn't happened yet, but we don't know what year this was set in. Maybe Ray Bradbury predicted the future, who knows? Probably not, because maybe I'll eat my words in 30 years, but I don't really think that some of the things that happen in this story are plausible, especially the thing where they cook food and send it up through the table, because obviously we do have like microwaves and stuff, but how are they going to get the resources? Like, it's a lot of like fine tuning. And again, I said I might eat my words in 30 years. Who knows? So the Veld is pretty easy to understand. It's not surface level because there's a lot of, I guess, symbolism in there and a lot of ideas. But since we did read it in middle school, it's not one of those like super high level of things, I guess. It's pretty easy to understand is what I'm trying to say. And if you're apprehensive about maybe reading it for an assignment, don't be, because the actual story is kind of interesting. It's a bit of like I guess, like one of those kind of children Alice in Wonderland-y situations where the kids are in charge and the parents end up paying for their sins. I don't know, not their sins, but like them not taking care of their own children, basically, because the whole reason why they ended up like the children ended up like that was because the parents never disciplined the children, because obviously the robots can do everything for the kids, but they can't teach them like emotions and proper manners and stuff. When you threaten to shut down a house and then let your kids lock you inside of a room that kills you, maybe technology bad. Maybe, just maybe, even though I'm recording this on a phone, again, we live in a society, as Ray Bradbury once said. Very poetic, honestly. So yes, on to the next one. Transition? Next one is another Ray Bradbury, obviously. We got All Summer in a Day, which I think a lot of people know about. I literally saw like a TikTok about this like a week ago or something. That's where I kind of got the idea for this video, which is a bit of a stretch, but you know, you get your inspiration where you can. So All Summer in a Day is also a very short, straightforward story, but there's a little more nuance to it, as in you have to like remember certain things. But basically, the whole thing is like the people there live on Venus, and they only get summer for like an hour every 7 years or something. And they're reading about it, and then there's Margot, this kid that gets bullied by like everyone in the class, and she gets locked in a closet, and then the sun comes out, woo, all the kids have this great time, and then they come back inside after the rain starts again, because when it's not sun, it's just raining constantly, and they're like, wait, Margot's still in the closet. And then they have to take her out, and that's the end of the story, because I assume that after the story, Margot like beat them all up, but we'll never really know, so that's my assumption. But if any of you have other takes on All Summer in the Day, I will gladly hear them, because honestly, I feel bad that Margot didn't get justice, but it's okay. Obviously, this story idea might seem kind of boring to someone who lives in this day and age when all these ideas are out, but because these stories are kind of like the first not the first instances, but like really popularizing the idea of like science fiction and like other worlds, it was kind of nuanced to be like, oh, what if on this planet, is it true? I did not look this up. Oh wait, no, obviously it's not true, because Venus is way too hot to even sustain rain. All it is like poison gas or something. Never mind. Yes, so obviously this wasn't true, and I'm not sure how much we knew about Venus at that time, but like, yeah, so they're on this other planet, other world, they're like, whoa, and then in this story, obviously this girl gets bullied, which is kind of like, oh, relatable, all of them are like us. But then, like, all these kids have never seen the sun before, and it's just the concept of, like, they're scared of what they don't know, and Margot keeps talking about the sun, and then they're just like, okay, no sun for you, even though she's, like, the most excited for it. And there is, like, the symbolism of, like, people being afraid of what they don't know. But in general, the story isn't as in-depth as some of the other ones I've read. But I just wanted to mention it because it is very popular, and really just, like, you see it a lot in schools, and you'll probably read it at some point, or you probably have, unless you're like a middle schooler coming to my account, which, welcome, but you probably won't understand a lot of my content. So that's All Summer in a Day. The next one is possibly the one that haunts me the most at night, because I always remembered what happened in it, but I never remember the name of it. Spoiler warnings. Yeah, next one. The next one we're going to talk about is There Will Come Soft Rains, and there isn't really a lot of rain in this one. Ray Bradbury, I guess, really likes the symbolism of rain or something. In fact, a lot of stuff he writes involves like fire and rain. That's just his thing, I guess. And he's an elemental. So There Will Come Soft Rains is about like a family that gets obliterated in a nuclear bomb, but you don't really tell at first. The only indication is like in the story. It talks about how the imprints of the family are on the back wall, And that's kind of a reference to, like, there's these, when the nuclear bomb goes off, there's like these imprints that they leave of like the people behind them, because it like washes out the color from everything except what's covering it. So if like the wall was black or something and like the thing hit, the outline of the family was still there. And that's like the only indication you get of the nuclear bomb, other than like later a tree falls and like everything dies. However, this is another bit of the not technology bad. This one isn't really technology bad. This one is more about like the ideas of war. It has nothing to do with the technology, but technology does play like the entire role of it. Like technology like is the main character, because it starts out with like the automated systems being like, today is like August or something, and then it's like it's these people's birthdays, blah blah blah, and there's all these like mechanisms that do stuff for the family, but obviously the family is obliterated, so they're not there anymore, and it's just the house doing it over and over again, because the automated house is no indication that they're gone and everything around them is gone. This one is a little bit more realistic in terms of the technology that's used. Obviously, like, realism doesn't matter because this is an old story, but this one does have more of the like Google Home, Siri reminder aspects to it. Like, you can kind of imagine it happening, not in like a future, but like a near future, as opposed to the Velt. That's not the point of this, though. I do remember a quote from this really clearly. It's just at 10 o'clock the house began to die, and it's like, that's when everything goes downhill. That's when the tree falls in and like everything starts to burn up in flames, and it's kind of like eventually all these things come to an end and it was never there. But the main point of the story is actually, I didn't remember this from middle school, but it is like an anti-war message, because it was written during the time of like the Cold War, and obviously during the Cold War the big threat was like the bombs between the countries, and because that was like kind of a real threat between people, even though nobody actually did anything, but everyone was like terrified, of course. It was kind of just like a story about what would happen if one of those bombs went off, and like how like the scenery is quiet, but like nature would be gone, but the mechanics would remain and all of that kind of thing. I wrote in my notes, Ray Bradbury would not like Google Home. He might, I don't know. I think he's still alive. He is not still alive, he died in 2012. Never mind. But yes. This story is a little bit different because I remember liking reading it, but I didn't know what it was about, because I don't think we had really gone into depth about like the Cold War and like bombs and stuff yet, and I hadn't done all my insane looking up pictures of nuclear imprints on things research yet. So I didn't know about the imprint thing, so of course I was like, what the heck is going on here? But it only took a second, and it's like one of the stories that I remember the most. And it's not necessarily for any like horror reason. It's more of just like, I think it was because of like the revelation I had about it. So I would say out of all of these, it's probably kind of like my favorite, because it's blocked out, the story's blocked out by like times and like how time passes no matter what, even though everyone's dead. This is There Will Come Soft Rains. Again, there really isn't rain, I think. There might be rain. Oh, no, it's called that because that's the name of the poem that they play at the end. Of course, he isn't there to tell them what poem to read him to sleep, so they read the poem, There Will Come Soft Rains, by Sarah Teasdale. There Will Come Soft Rains by Sarah Teasdale. What now? The last one I wanted to mention, just kind of briefly, as like a relate to the audience type of thing, would be the time I read The Yellow Wallpaper, because I saw it on TikTok, but reading The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman, and that one is slightly different because we didn't have to read it in school. Surprisingly, I think some people had to read it in school, but we never did, and I'm surprised we never did, because I like the story, even though it did take me a second to figure out what was going on, because I actually thought like the hallucinations were real, because I end up sometimes I overthink it to the point where I make the stuff literal, instead of it being like just like mental state. So obviously like The Yellow Wallpaper is just about this woman who is, I don't know, like depressed, mentally ill, something in that realm, and she's like prescribed bed rest, and then she ends up having to stay in a bed for months, and then she stays in a room with like ugly yellow wallpaper, and I thought I had seen somewhere that the wallpaper was poisonous, but I think it was just her own mind. And it was like she started seeing a woman in the wallpaper, like hallucination wise, and then she ended up ripping the wallpaper, and she's like, ooh, I'm finally free, but in reality she had just like gone further down the rabbit hole of her mental health because, well, how are you supposed to cope when you're just sitting there all day? Like, what do you expect to happen, dear doctors of the 1900s? Thankfully, they've kind of phased out bed rest except for like pregnancy stuff and other issues, I guess. But generally, it's not advised to stay in bed for that long voluntarily, or at all, even non-voluntarily, but at least non-voluntarily, it's not really your choice. That's all that's going to be in the video for today. So we covered the 4 short stories. I got a book of short stories, multiple books of short stories for my birthday, so I think I will be able to possibly do more videos like this in the future where I can cover more ground in like the same period of time as I would a normal video. Hopefully this is a type of content that you viewers would like to see in the future, and if you have any comments on the short stories that I went over today, feel free to leave them in the comments below, and remember to subscribe if you haven't. You don't have to, but you probably should, because that's how I get my content out to people and they can see my videos. Jazz hands. So yes, thank you again for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.